My name is Kayla Brooks, 31 years old, living and working in Boston. I'm the only one in the family who's never borrowed a single dollar from anyone. Yet I'm always the one told I don't know how to live for others. I stopped trying to explain. 10 years ago, I moved out of the suburban house my mother called a warm nest. To me, it was just a pit stop between wounds inflicted by people who were supposed to love me. I studied law at Northeastern University and graduated with an overwhelming amount of student debt. While my younger sister, Megan, was traveling around Europe on our parents' savings, I worked 3 jobs to cover rent and tuition. She called it life experience. And my mother smiled and said, "She needs to find herself." As used to want to ask, "What about me?" But I stayed quiet, like I always did. I wasn't the kind of daughter people doted on. They said I was too ambitious, that I was cold, unfeminine, and only thought of myself. Funny, since they only ever called when their credit cards got declined or when they needed a cosigner for a car loan. At 29, after 6 years at a major law firm, I quit and started my own practice. When I announced it, my father scoffed. "So you think you're that good now?" And Megan posted a long Facebook status saying she was worried about her sister, who was clearly burnt out and delusional about her own abilities. 3 years later, Brooks Legal and Consulting had nearly 20 employees and a client list that included several major corporations across New England. Last February, I purchased a 3-bedroom penthouse in Beacon Hill, where the Charles River shimmered every evening from my windows. No one in my family called to congratulate me. 2 months later, Megan texted, "My card got declined at the OB visit. Can you help me out?" I didn't respond. My mother called right after, her tone sharp. "A decent person knows how to make sacrifices. Your sister's about to become a mother, and you're living all alone in that cold rooftop apartment. For what?" I looked out the window, city lights reflecting off the glass of red wine in my hand. Cold? This home was the first place I could exhale without feeling like I was a disappointment. Megan had always been the light of the family. She dropped out of college, then got engaged to a bartender the family called a dreamer with a warm heart. They broke up less than 2 months into living together, after he sold everything in the apartment to pay off gambling debts. My family still defended him. "He's a sweet guy, just unlucky." And me? When I earned a scholarship to law school, my mother said, "That's fine, but don't let a degree strip you of your womanly essence." When I won my first case against a major fraudulent corporation, my father muttered, "No one gives you praise for that kind of win." And now they call me the outsider who lives comfortably but lacks compassion. I'm not as wealthy as they think. I just don't spend money trying to be loved. Megan's wedding was held on a Saturday afternoon in late June at a historic hotel by the river in Providence. They rented the top floor of the Larimore, a space usually reserved for galas or corporate conferences. I arrived on time, wearing a floor-length emerald dress, hair neatly pinned, no jewelry. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone calm, like a distant guest. Maybe that's what I had become. The bride, my sister, was basking in the spotlight, her beaded mermaid gown trailing nearly 3 feet across the wooden floor, her arm linked with Brian's. Her new husband, and a former employee I had fired from my firm for falsifying client records, planned to stay for a bit, then leave quietly. But that changed when I saw my mother waving from the corner of the VIP lounge, the one marked Bride's Family Only. I walked over, reluctant. My mother, Carol, dressed like the one getting married herself in a deep purple dress trimmed with pearls, plum lipstick, and a smile that said, "Don't ask, just obey." My father, Charles, was already standing behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning me like I was a flawed spreadsheet. "Ayla, come in for a moment," my mother said sweetly. "We need to discuss something. Just family." I stepped into the private room. As the door closed, the air changed. "First of all," my mother said, "you look better than I expected." I guess the penthouse is doing wonders for your health? Megan came in last, still holding her champagne glass, eyes sparkling but voice thick with meaning. Sweet sister, I don't want drama. It's a happy day. But we need to be clear about something. I looked at the three of them, bracing for the hit. And then it came. We want you to consider transferring your apartment, my father said. To Megan and Brian. A flicker of disbelief crossed my face, barely a laugh, more like my body rejecting the absurdity. You're asking me to give them my apartment? I asked, clearly. Not give, my mother quickly corrected. A swap. Brian owns a 2-bedroom in Cranston. Quiet, lots of light. Perfect for someone single. You don't need 3 bedrooms, Megan chimed in, as if she were stating undeniable logic. You live alone. Brian and I are starting a family. We need space. I set my glass down on the table. You dragged me in here, during Megan's wedding, to pressure me into trading a nearly $2 million penthouse for a 2-bedroom in the suburbs. Because I don't have a husband or child? You don't need to use the word pressure, my father growled. It's a reasonable suggestion. Think long-term. Family comes first. Family? The people who've never once asked if I'm doing okay? Never cared if I was happy, only ever called when they needed money for doctors, tuition, or this lavish wedding? You always blow things out of proportion, Megan scoffed. Do you have any idea how many women give up their careers for family? And you cling to that apartment like it's some sacred treasure. Because it's mine, I said slowly. I worked my ass off for it. And you? You threw a 300-guest wedding with money from who knows where, and now you want to seize my home? My parents said nothing. Megan exhaled sharply, then spoke in a low, pointed voice. You can make everyone uncomfortable today, but you're the one who'll have to live with that loneliness for the rest of your life. I took a step back, eyes sweeping the room filled with silent judgment. I'd rather live alone in a home I built than cram myself into hollow expectations and love with conditions. I turned and walked out, leaving behind faces that couldn't hold a smile anymore. I hadn't made it 10 steps before I heard heels hurrying behind me. My mother. Kayla, she called softly but with strain. You can't walk out like this. I stopped in the hotel's main hallway, where antique paintings and crystal chandeliers bore witness to every scheme wrapped in the name of family. My family tried to take my home at a wedding, and you think I should stay for cake? I asked. Not loudly, but loud enough to freeze her in place. I don't understand why you're reacting so harshly. I thought maybe you could help your sister during a hard time. A hard time? Megan's wearing a Vera Vienne wedding gown and throwing a 6-figure wedding at a heritage hotel. Where's the hardship, Mom? She couldn't answer, but I knew she was about to play her usual card. You live alone, she said gently. You don't need such a big apartment. That place, it could be a fresh start for the newlyweds. And I don't deserve a fresh start of my own? Behind us, the door opened again. Megan appeared, her extravagant gown trailing behind her like a royal train. She looked like a princess, but her eyes were full of calculation. It's sad, really. You still haven't changed. Still acting superior, still making everything about you. You came to my wedding like it was your stage to perform on. I turned to face the sister who had taken so much from me and still called me selfish. You hate my attitude but want my home. You've never cared about anyone but yourself. Megan said flatly. All I asked for was a chance to start a family, and you act like I'm stealing an inheritance. Inheritance? You didn't contribute a single dollar. I spent 3 years running on fumes, working at law firms by day, coffee shops by night, just to afford my first office. What do you know about starting anything? Megan pressed her lips together. My father stepped in then, unclear how much he'd overheard. He stood next to my mother, arms crossed, speaking through clenched teeth. You've changed, Kayla. Ever since you got a little money, you've become distant, cold. You forgot what family means. It's not that I forgot. I remember too well. I remember calling home exhausted, and Mom saying, "Stop whining, you made your bed." I remember signing my first client and Dad muttering, "Pure luck, you won't make it far." Megan writing online that I was drunk on power. That's family? All I ever asked for was respect. I said, voice calm. Not love with strings attached. Not a relationship where I'm only worthy if I give everything away. Megan scoffed. Then don't act surprised no one ever feels close to you. Because I was never allowed to be myself in that house, I said slowly. I had to stay silent so I wouldn't be called rude. Pay for things so I wouldn't be seen as ungrateful. Succeed, but never too much. I turned away just as Megan hurled one final line. Quiet, but cold as stone. You're going to grow old alone in that apartment, Kayla. And no one will even remember you existed. I stopped walking. The grand ballroom of the Lairmore was decorated like a royal wedding. High ceiling, soft golden lights, violin music floating across elegantly set tables. Nearly 200 guests were laughing, toasting, taking photos with the bride and groom, until an unnatural silence began to spread from the entrance. Megan was storming toward me, the heavy train of her gown sweeping the wooden floor. Her face no longer belonged to someone recently blessed. Her eyes were burning red as she stepped close. You always want to be the victim, Megan hissed. You love pretending this whole family owes you something, but the truth is, you're the most selfish one here. I don't owe any of you anything, I replied. If anything, I owe you thanks for teaching me how to live without needing anyone. That answer darkened her expression, and then, like a lightning strike out of nowhere, she slapped me. A sharp crack echoed across the ballroom. My champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor into glittering shards. The entire room seemed to freeze. The music stopped, laughter vanished, heads turned. Some gasped. I heard the whispers. That's the bride's sister, right? Well, look at her attitude. Typical, successful, but arrogant woman. Heat bloomed across my cheek. I stayed rooted, arms slack, too stunned to react. Next to me, my mother sighed and looked away. My father clenched his jaw as if I were the one who'd caused a scene. Not one, not a single one of the 3 people who shared my blood spoke up for me. She left her hand raised as if the slap crowned her. Her eyes burned with smug triumph. Silently, I reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and unlocked the screen. What are you doing? Megan asked, her voice cracking. She wasn't used to a silent Kayla. Silently, I typed a few lines and pressed send. Guests began to stir. A few pulled out their phones, whispering, sharing. It didn't take long before my phone buzzed. Once, then twice, then 5 notifications. Messages from colleagues, old classmates, a reporter from the Boston Ledger. All of them had received what I just sent. My mother stepped closer, gripping my arm. You're ruining your sister's big day. I looked her straight in the eye. I didn't ruin anything. I simply shared what just happened. Word for word, nothing added. What did you send? Megan snapped, her voice starting to shake. You had no right. You hit me in front of 200 witnesses and thought I wouldn't say a word, I said quietly. You thought it ended with a shattered glass of champagne? I raised my phone, showing them the message I had sent, a short summary of the incident, sent to my group of friends, mostly lawyers, reporters, and media professionals, including Judge Rachel Whitmore, who had shaken my hand not 10 minutes earlier. My father snatched the phone from my hand, but I had already locked the screen. This is a private matter, he said in a low voice. You shouldn't be airing family drama online. Then why didn't you stop your daughter from slapping me in public? They said nothing. I stepped back and said clearly, You've always wanted me to be silent. Not this time. My phone kept vibrating in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. That short message I sent had started working. Among my closest friends were Lauren Fields, a veteran reporter at the Boston Ledger, Judge Rachel Whitmore, who once led the state coalition for women's professional rights in law, and Marcus Yates, a crisis communications strategist I worked with on a major internal harassment lawsuit. I hadn't lied. I kept it simple. Pressured to hand over Penthouse to sister during wedding. Refused. Got slapped in public. 3 family members witnessed. None intervened. Roughly 200 people present. Simple. Clear. Enough to strip the glossy paint off what they call family. Within 10 minutes, someone had posted a video of the incident online. It wasn't long, about 13 seconds, but it captured everything. The slap, the broken glass, me standing still and Megan turning away with that smug expression. You could also see my mother and father standing there, doing nothing. And then the replies started flooding in. Kayla, do you need backup? Lauren. If press reaches out, call me immediately. Don't let them shape the story. Marcus. I stepped out of the reception. I saw the whole thing. When you're ready to go public, I've got your back. Rachel. I stayed composed, walking past the reception area and down the hallway behind the ballroom. Everything felt hazy, like I'd just walked through a fire, but wasn't afraid of getting burned anymore. My phone buzzed again. It was Tracy, a former business partner of Megan's back when she worked at Bloom & Stone Advertising Agency. The message was short. What happened? PR is buzzing about Megan's video. I opened Instagram. A local news account had already posted the clip with the caption, "Incident at luxury wedding at the Larimore. Bride sister slapped over penthouse dispute. Boston drama, wedding gone wrong." Below it were hundreds of comments. This is terrifying, a real look at toxic family pressure. That woman was incredibly strong. She stood her ground without striking back or running away. Cunning. Her own parents didn't move? That's brutally cold. My name wasn't public yet, I still had some control. But those who knew me had already figured it out. Colleagues, clients, partners, they knew. And this time, no one turned away. I received a call. It was Claire Montgomery, coordinator of the Massachusetts State Bar Ethics Committee. Kayla, I'm sorry to contact you over the weekend, but I saw the news while I was at home. Are you all right? We're meeting early next week. If you need help with image protection, let me assist you. This incident could become the foundation for a major campaign about personal boundaries in family relationships. I froze. Not a scandal, that was her word. A foundation. That was when I knew. They picked the wrong person to come after. I remained beneath the soft white lights of the hotel hallway, spine straight, phone in hand. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. They had spent my entire life teaching me not to embarrass anyone, but they never once worried about embarrassing me. I left the Larimore just before 9 p.m. The music had resumed, glasses clinked again, but the celebration was no longer intact. The looks I received as I walked through the ballroom weren't judgmental anymore. They were cautious, as if they had witnessed something irreversible. 10 hours later, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. The unraveling had begun. Message from Lauren Fields, the reporter I had texted the night before. It's official. Megan's been placed on leave. Bloom & Stone CEO said her conduct was inconsistent with brand values. An hour later, I received an email from someone I didn't know. Attached was an internal response letter from the Media Association. Bloom & Stone had long prided itself on partnering with dozens of human rights and gender equality brands. The fact that one of their associate directors slapped someone at a wedding and was left unchecked by her family had become a PR nightmare. As I finished making my first cup of coffee, Brian, Megan's new husband, was being named on a Reddit thread about professional ethics in financial consulting. A former coworker wrote, "I worked with Brian. He never took accountability for client issues. And now he's married to someone like that? Makes perfect sense." That comment got nearly 5,000 upvotes in 3 hours. Social media users started resurfacing Meghan's old posts, ones where she spoke about social justice and how women deserve to be treated with dignity in all spaces. Clips from interviews, podcast appearances, and past human rights campaigns were now being placed side by side with the video of her slapping me at her own wedding. And then, there were my parents. That afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Herbert Wallace, manager of the prestigious West Haven Country Club, where my parents had been members for over 15 years. "I apologize for bothering you, Miss Kayla," he said cautiously, "but given the current situation, we are re-evaluating Mr. and Mrs. Carroll and Charles Brooks' membership. We've received complaints from 3 other members asking the board to review public behavior that no longer aligns with the values of the club." My parents had always lived for appearances. Photos with wealthy friends, gala nights, eloquent speeches about family values. They raised me to believe that reputation was the greatest asset, but they never imagined that one phone and 13 seconds of video could expose the part of them they worked hardest to hide. The next day, an editorial titled "When Home Becomes a Place You Must Defend Yourself" was published in the Boston Ledger. No names were mentioned, but every detail was unmistakable. A successful woman, publicly insulted, slapped at a wedding, and reduced to a cautionary tale for daring to hold on to what she had built with her own hands. At the bottom of the article was a line that left me in silence. "Success doesn't make someone cold. It's how others treat them that forces them to stand alone." That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something about the digits made me pause. "Kayla Brooks?" A deep, clear female voice. "This is Judge Rachel Whitmore. We've met a few times at the Boston Regional Legal Conference. I was at the wedding, and I believe I need to say something to you. I'm not sure whether to thank you or apologize for the wake-up call," I said, half joking, half true. She replied gently, "I witnessed everything, and one thing was clear. This wasn't a moment of family chaos. This was the result of long-term erosion. Your family," she continued, "created an environment where hurting you became normal. They didn't hit you every day, but they made you feel guilty for being successful, for setting boundaries, for living differently. That slap last night," she said slowly, "is merely the final act in a long pattern of emotional abuse. You don't need anyone's permission to call it what it is." After we hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, lights off. The glow from the Boston skyline was enough to show my reflection in the glass. Dark circles under my eyes, hair slightly messy, and something different in the way I looked back at myself. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, did well, caused no trouble, my family would eventually love me. That if I helped enough, they'd acknowledge my efforts. But in truth, all they learned was how to exploit me more. I remembered the times my mother called asking to borrow money, always temporarily, never returned. The times I paid my dad's medical bills, only to see him post golf photos in Miami weeks later. The times Meghan had a card issue, and I was the only name she called. But never once did she ask how I was doing. I used to justify it. They were old, stressed, didn't understand me. But if strangers treated me that way, I'd never allow it. So why forgive it just because it's family? That slap, it wasn't just a hit to the face. It was a hit to the silence I'd been sustaining for over a decade. The pain wasn't what stayed with me. It was the realization that they'd stopped pretending, and so could I. I started typing a note on my phone, just for myself, something to read later, when I felt weak. They don't hate me, but they don't love me the way I had hoped. They love having me when they need something, and resent me when I say no. And that is no longer my fault. I had never felt a kind of loneliness so peaceful. 3 weeks after the chaotic wedding, I got a text from Meghan. Just 4 words. "Can we talk now?" I stared at the screen, then set the phone down without replying. During those 3 weeks, I hadn't written anything, posted anything, or appeared anywhere in the media. I hadn't badmouthed them. I hadn't released any further details. I let the world do the rest. Megan was let go, not for the slap, but for everything that followed. The hypocrisy, the smug defiance, the unraveling. She and Brian moved in temporarily with my parents in Quincy and stopped showing up at public events. Brian, during a company meeting, was bluntly asked by a client partner, "Can you ensure transparency when you let emotions justify violence within your own family?" There was no answer. 3 days later, he resigned. As for my parents, they were removed from the guest list of 3 community events that month. West Haven Club officially terminated their membership after receiving over 20 member complaints. And me? I kept my penthouse in Beacon Hill. But I changed a few things. The guest bedroom they once called excessive became a reading room, complete with a sofa bed for visiting friends. The second room I turned into a mentoring space, where I coached senior law students every Saturday, kids who, for the first time, had someone believe they could do something great. Each evening, I'd sit on my balcony, glass of red wine in hand, watching the lights ripple across the river on the office building windows. The city stayed as lively as ever, but inside me was a peace I had never known. Not in 31 years. One late evening, I received an email from the Boston Center for Professional Women. They asked if I'd be willing to join a panel discussion titled, "When Personal Boundaries Become Collective Action." I paused for a moment, then clicked accept. Months later, I overheard a conversation at a conference. "Is that Kayla Brooks?" "Yeah. The one whose sister slapped her at a wedding because she wouldn't give up her home." I used to think she was intimidating, but now, I think she's brave. There was nothing to look back at, so I walked on. Because recognition doesn't need eye contact. Just truth. 1 year later, Megan and Brian divorced. No drama, no accusations, only no reason left to stay once everything had crumbled. Megan moved back in with our mother. My father relocated to a smaller apartment on the south side, near the old golf course, but no longer played with his usual group. I never got another call from them, and I don't expect one. That silence isn't punishment. It's protection. I don't need their apologies or validation anymore. I just need them to stay away from the life I fought so hard to reclaim. With my youth, and with every scar. It's only when you're no longer afraid to lose something that you realize what's truly worth keeping. Kayla's story isn't just a wake-up call about the toxicity hidden in relationships labeled family. It's the powerful journey of a woman who chose to stand for herself. When treated like a walking wallet, when her boundaries were ignored and her silence was exploited, Kayla chose truth over pleasing and weighty silence over loud retaliation. In doing so, she didn't just reclaim her home, she reclaimed herself, once and for all. What do you think about Kayla's choice? Is silence the strongest form of resistance in toxic relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about family and resilience.